What's up, everyone? It's your boy Mastermind here of Ohio Cannabis Live. Here on the scene live from King City Garden, Cincinnati. Getting ready to do the tour. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe button, and follow me on social media for updates.
So right now, everything is taken from our mothering plant. If we started to want to pop seeds or bring in our own genetics, when you germinate a seed from that point to the point of actually being able to take production cuts off of your mom is about 2 to 3 month period. So for us, it's similar to extraction and processing. The biomass in affects biomass going out. So making sure we start healthy is going to mitigate the potential of running into problems. We will run into those problems. Certain chemicals through biosafe, xylitol, sanidate. Xylitol is peracetic acid. Sanidate is a combination of hydrogen peroxide and peracetic acid. So we're not giving that to the plants, but hard surfaces, floors, walls, and then we also will come in with what's called a foamer by Athena. Athena is the nutrient line we run. They've come out with their own contraption of basically, it's called Reset. It's a periolic acid, and it's very similar to xylitol and sanidate, but it's, again, used for the sole purpose of just cleaning your area, if you will. This room I'm about to walk in right now, Flower 2, is our double tier room. It's about 10 days into a flowering state. So when you move a plant from a veg room, mother, to flower, the only thing that happens is the movement of the plant. To induce a plant into flower, we have to change the photo period. So our mom and veg plants are on 18 hours of light, 6 hours of darkness. To induce a plant into flower, we go 12 hours of light, 12 hours of darkness. That triggers the flowering plant to know, hey, it's time to flower. However, the first 3 weeks is generally known as stretch because your plant will generally, by a good rule of thumb, double in height during those first 3 weeks. So even though we've induced it into a flowering state, it's continuously vegetating during those first 3 weeks. If you don't mind stepping on this bleach bath right here, again, the sole purpose is just trying to mitigate anything, pests and pathogens that may be on our feet. This is a sticky trap right here, if you don't mind that one. And again, these are just biosecurities, things that we're trying to do to make sure if anything was picked up, at least this diluted bleach solution will try and knock it back.
So, and I may have missed this, so there's not a pollination period with grown weed.
So right now, we only select females. We're not breeding in-house right now, so nothing is being pollinated. The female cannabis plant, if we are popping seeds, you have a certain period of time after it starts to actually germinate to identify male or female characteristics. If we see any male characteristics, we weed those plants out. We only want to grow females in here. If we were a breeding facility or had a different area allocated to breeding, what you would do is basically open pollination. There's kind of 2 ways to breed. You would go into a room like this where it's all females in a flowering state, and you would bring a male plant in. That male plant would pollinate your room, and you're crossing 2 strains. So the concept, there's many concepts of breeding, but one of the large ones is identifying attributes from a specific plant and trying to basically take one from each. So if I have a sour Skittles that yields very well, is very resilient to disease and pests, but does not test high as far as its THC content, what I want to do is I want to try and locate another female that has a tendency of testing very high potency-wise. So I would take the potency attribute from that plant, the resilience and the weight that it pulls from that plant, and try and crossbreed those. So now I'm checking off what I call my boxes for sales. It is, in my opinion, unfortunate, but still it's a THC-driven market. So we as growers do the best of our ability to educate the people we sell to, who by default can educate the consumer, mostly about terpene profiles, because the sensation you feel, if anyone is a patient here, it's typically derived from terpenes. And there's been this long, I don't want to say it's a misconception, but it's in reality it is, where every market I've worked in, and there's been 6 different states, every sales-driven state is THC-driven. So the higher the THC, the content, the more that plant can be sold for. So to your question about pollination, nothing is pollinated here. If we wanted to pollinate, it would be breeding. This room, like I said, it's all females, and what we do in here, and it's what I think is pretty cool, is we have a pretty unique medium. So when they come in, whether if it's coming from a clone or if whatever the case may be, we transplant these right into this bag. So these are 1.25 gallon bags. It's a very cool mixture. So it's coco coir, which at its core is an inert medium. So similar to rock wool, without adding anything to it, there's no nutritional value. So we have to pre-charge these what we intend to feed to the plant. This is a unique blend because it has coco coir, diatomaceous earth, and sog moss, and perlite to help with drainage. So it's really wonderful in the sense of how the plant will rebound. The plant has so many stress factors, even when you move it from one room to another, even if it's not being transplanted or being moved from the medium, it still has a stress response. So us as growers, we try to do everything possible to make that period as easy as can be. So to acclimate a veg plant to a new flower room, you got to keep in mind that we're coming into a room with a different light intensity, a different setting, different parameters. So us as growers, we do things to alleviate that stress. And one of them being, which I was provided with from the owners, is the design of the facility. We have our dehumidifiers all running above us. These are 720 pints so that they could pull per day. But more importantly, and it's a little hard to see, is on the back ends of my wall, I have humidifiers and I'm blowing steam. And you may be wondering, well, why are you introducing moisture into a flowering state? Well, the size of these plants and the age, with them being this young, they don't transpire enough on their own. If I were to come in here with a thermohygrometer, without any plants, this room's probably about 40% humidity. I want that to be closer to 60%. So what I have to do by default is introduce more steam, more moisture, so it's more indicative of the environment it needs to be. There's something called vapor pressure deficit. It's how plants metabolize, and your relative humidity and your temperature is how it's calculated. So in early flower, and it's measured in kilopascals, we want to have a 1.0 to 1.2 kPa. Or in veg, we want to have about a 0.8 kPa. So coming into a room and identifying any microclimates I may have is extremely imperative. If I notice my carriage 1 is reading 10 degrees different than carriage 14, there's an issue. And the plant's VPD will be absolutely different, and it will change the rate. For example, if you have too high of a VPD in an early stage, what's being asked of the plant is basically trying to transpire at an exponentially faster rate than it can. So in a stress response, the female plant, cannabis, on the underside of a fan leaf has what's called a stomata. Its primary function is it regulates gas exchange, so it takes in CO2. Good rule of thumb is by introducing CO2 to a cannabis plant, you can increase yield up from 10 to 20%. So its primary function is regulating gas exchange, but it also has defense mechanisms, and one of which is if it's too early on, it's being asked to transpire too much, it will close its stomata to limit transpiration, and you'll come in and you'll see a lot of sad girls. So in here, everyone's praying, everyone's perking up. It's conducive to a very good environment. So if I ever see something that may be out of the ordinary, you'll see me walking around frequently with my gauge, because we having a system called GrowLink, it controls lights, humidity, dehumes, watering, everything. And these sensors you see right there look like little prongs. It takes the average of those and it drives the parameter set points that I have in place. So virtually I trust everything, but physically I'm confirming that, yes, that prong right there is reading 78 degrees and 60% humidity with a handheld. So there's a lot of redundancies in place, but this room right here will, and again, is a good rule of thumb, the first layer of trellis, which is used as a support, not a restraint, that's the size the plant was brought in. When this reaches day 21, a sign of a healthy plant is this will be double in height. So something we're doing today is we'll come in with our second layer of trellis and we'll start to scrog these girls through. So you open up your canopy, you have a consistent canopy for light penetration and airflow. We'll also be coming in and cleaning up some of the bottoms, lower lateral branches that inevitably will be doing nothing other than taking energy away from its apex. So these are week one going into week 2 of flower. Like I said, even though it's flowering, the first few weeks it's going to vegetatively grow. Then it's going to start to focus on its forming bud sites where we'll start to see fruiting and blossoming. This is one of our rooms. Like I said, everything is double tier. So the way we would get and work up there is, it's pretty cool. We have a catwalk system. So these carriages open. We have catwalks that we can bring in, and then we can have teams working on the top and bottom. So work efficiency is never slowing down. We know that, and we want to accommodate that for our sales team.
Oh my God.
Smells?
So there were about 1,000 plants over that other
1,428. So there's 6 per table. We have 17 carriages and 7 lights.
Yeah, 18. Oh, how many? Okay.
There's 17.
I thought there were 30 like, birth.
No, so we have carriages 1 through 17. What we're doing here is we have 7 lights per row, and we're fitting 6 plants per light. So on a table, there's 42 plants, and we're only, in this room, you can see, utilizing the bottom tier.
Oh, I didn't see the, okay, I thought there were only 2
Yep.
rows. That's why my numbers are off. Okay.
You're fine. So in this room, and if you guys didn't see in the other room, those back there are my humidifiers. So we're at a point, and we've been at a point where I don't want to introduce any more moisture. I'm actually trying to pull as much moisture as I possibly can out to try and mitigate the risk of botrytis, yeast and mold, anything that we can fail on a COA for.
Now, if you get some, though, how are you?
Yes, sir. So,
If you get that and your plant's going to infect it, how in the world do you clean this space?
So
Yeah, I mean,
after a room turnover, what happens is we'll come in, we'll release, slow release chlorine dioxide quick pack. So it's a gas.
Yeah.
So you'll turn your HVAC equipment off because we don't want it to go into other rooms. Everything gets cut from the stock. It gets weighed per metric individual wet weight. And then what's going to happen is we'll come in and we'll do a complete room turnover of the guys will come in after plants are removed. All biomass is off the tables. We like to use vacuums, not brooms. Believe it or not, sweeping something kicks a lot more spores in the air than actually vacuuming it does. But again, it's a double-edged sword because that vacuum must be cleaned out prior to being used in any other room. Us as humans are the biggest vectors for bringing pests and pathogens through. So right now, what we're looking at is, again, this is the first 7 tables is Mimosa. She just, looking at her, looking through a scope, she's really well developed. She may come down a couple days earlier than some of the other strains down. And it's really important to start to learn your attributes about your plants because you want to group them together. So like-minded strains, whether that's the attributes of how they grow or how they drink. Because believe it or not, some girls will drink completely different. There is a strategy of irrigation that we utilize and that a lot of growers use. It's crop steering. It's basically inducing your plant into a stress factor where you get a stress response. So what you do is during the first irrigation event, what I want to do is I want to hit field capacity prior to having runoff occur. So the point being of grouping like-minded strains is my sour Skittles may take 6 shots to reach field capacity, where my apples and bananas takes 13 shots. So I don't want to, sacrifice the one for the other. So what we can do is strategically place these plants in their zones so we can at least try to cater to that individual strain right now. So as we walk down, this is all Mimosa.
These come in on these carts, from cart to cart, or you pick up each plant individually?
So the plants will get moved to basically a mobile polyfilm cart. So it's similar to a tray like this, but we're just moving that from room to room. So these are stationary, short of going left and right, but they do get moved in. And if it is ever a point where my stock is not as supported as can be, it is not a race game. It's never sacrifice efficiency for speed. So we're going to one hand on the stalk, one hand on the underbottom. If they need to be moved individually, they will. But when they get moved from the vegetative room to their flowering room, they're brought in poly tables and then they're brought in alike. So again, whether that's strain specific or characteristic specific, we're bringing these girls in so that they can have the best opportunity to flourish. That's why the first 8 to 9 tables is all mimosa. Short of, I'm smiling because we have a few outliers where you can see some were mistagged, but in metric we can still go in and change that compliantly just by identifying our RFID code. So to that, all of these plants, when they reach 12 inches in height, they're assigned a barcode where it not only has to be affixed to the plant, but it has to be affixed to the lowest possible branch without hanging in the soil line. So again, there's a lot of things that, even though I'm the cultivation manager, I always make it one of my first things when I'm in a different state to familiarize myself with the regulatory body and the rules and regulations, because this rule, even though it's very similar to Michigan, so in Michigan you have the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, their rule is 12 inches, it gets tagged. They do not have literature about the tag canopy in the soil line. Well, we're in Ohio, not Michigan, so I have to be inclined to the rules in Ohio, and that's what we're following here. These right here are just sticky traps. It is not really a prevention, but more of an indication of what you're dealing with. For us, it's fungus gnats. Fungus gnats are, I would say, your most common pest. Under a microscope, it has an elongated abdomen with a wing set folded back that's the same size of its body. I always use the analogy of, I compare it to mosquitoes in West Nile. They have the ability to transmit disease. You'll hear a lot of growers say they're not that detrimental, but they can be if you don't know what you're dealing with. And that is not just the adults, but their life stages. So their larvae, their eggs. So us as growers, a lot of times, we're preventative to a point, but if we need to treat something, a lot of times you're treating a life cycle. And so, for example, if we ever had spider mites, which we won't, you're going to be spraying on days 1, 4, and 7. So that's going to take care of the adults, their larvae, and their eggs. But you also walk through and see sachets. Those are beneficial bugs, predator mites. So these are bugs that we use literally to combat unwanted predators. So I talked about fungus gnats. Another bug that growers have to deal with are called aphids. They're round, squat, under a microscope. They have what looks like 2 tailpipes. They're referred to as chronicles. They're a nuisance because of their reproduction rate. They're asexual. So they're born with the ability to give live birth. So again, if we see anything like that, we're now in a control phase, not prevention, but we have nothing like that going on in the garden. Our beneficials we release after, because we preventatively sprayed early in veg and mom, and then we don't like to spray really anything at all. So we just release beneficials, and then it's scouting. It's understanding your action threshold and what you're dealing with, and then how to go after that. So a lot of times, what you may be fighting, you have to know what the signs and symptoms they leave because they're too small to see with your naked eye. So as we go down, you can see just the attributes of a different strain. Well, right away, we go from mimosa to tropical runts. Tropical runts is different. It has different attributes. Your mimosa, where I could even see without a scope, it looks like it's finishing off. This trop runts is shooting fresh pistils through. She's going to take more time, probably more indicative of a 63-day cycle, where our mimosa is going to be closer to a 56-day. We walk down, we see another strain right here. This is blueberry muffin. So this, and I mean this, is one of the more unique strains I've dealt with. I'm very curious to see what her terpene profile is when we get her tested. She smells amazing. I mean that. There's a lot of strains that have almost an artificial smell to it, where it's like too good to be true. She's one of them. She smells like a blueberry muffin. It's pretty unique, to say the least. So we wear gloves, obviously, for cross-contamination, but one of the things that people don't realize is the oils on your skin will degrade your trichome heads. So the best of our ability, if we're ever working in here, you'll see we have sleeves that get washed at the end of each day, similar to our scrubs, because as we're reaching over, even the smallest bit of my skin pressing up on a trichome head can degrade it. So again, we want to be as careful as possible. We walk into another strain right now, being apples and bananas, and again, you can look at the characteristics, you can look at the bud structure and see how different she is. So to me, I've always been fascinated with how they grow. It's really, it's a unique plant. She's very resilient. I say it's easy to grow weed. It's hard to grow very good weed. Because she does not want to just die, but there's things that you have to do to care. There's so much TLC to go from average to that premium. And here, one of the things I love is there's so many group like-minded individuals where we are not okay with complacency. I like to exceed. I like to be the best at what I can be. And just knowing the group of people we have, all I ask is be receptive to education, learning, and being transparent. And as a team, we're really going to exceed. So this room, and again, and something I didn't touch up on is the orientation of our HVAC. We've created a racetrack. Whenever you have a double-tier system, water and air take the flow, the path of least resistance. So when you implement a second tier, you have resistance. So what we've done during the initial build-out is created this racetrack where we have fans and fresh air blowing this way. We have our dehumidifiers getting blown up, taking in that stagnant air, and driving across our exhaust. We capped off the top. There's times where when people are building facilities, they'll look at loads like the number of lights they have, and they'll say, okay, if there's 10 lights in a room and they're each 1,000 lights, this is how many BTUs I need to cool it. What they tend to not think about is your ancillary heat, something like your exhaust. So coming from your dehume, I have 90 plus degrees coming over that. So a lot of times people don't take that into consideration and they undersize. We did not do that. We really took care of all A through Z, and we've created this cohesive racetrack where our room, again, from carriage 17 to carriage 1 is really spot on, both CO2, my temperature, and my humidity. So again, as a grower, all I can ask is to be given the tools, and they've given me the best tools possible. So this is a later flowering round. We have about 2 weeks left before it gets harvested. Like I said, that mimosa will get taken down earlier. We're gonna watch these. We'll watch their trichomes, the color of which under a scope to help us identify when she's ready to be taken at her peak potency. Any questions?
You're not using any pesticide?
So early on in mother and veg, we're using 25B products. Once there is any established sites, we're not spraying anything. I believe here in the state, we actually compliantly cannot do insecticides and fungicides after day 21 of flower. And as growers, even if that wasn't there, once I've developed a bud site, I want to limit the amount of moisture I'm putting onto that because, again, it's going to be more prone to develop bud rot, botrytis, things that will inevitably fail a COA and will get held against us. So it's really important to understand what you're looking for, when to look for it specifically, and just do routine checks. So we have those in place to, again, mitigate potential error because there will be some, but it's under our control of how much that is.
How do you just come up with that?
No, so if I were to breed one, to your question earlier about pollination, I can make up that name. I believe it actually has to be legally approved by the state. Something like this, ice cream cake, this is a strain that's been tried and true from reputable sources, so we stick with the name. So ice cream cake, apples and bananas, a lot of times the way it's named is what it smells or what it may look like or maybe indicative of, but other times you'll just get a name that is just thrown out of the blue sometimes. But the blueberry muffin is one where, again, it's blueberry muffin, it smells like a blueberry muffin. So again, that's derivative of its terpenes, not its THC, something that we're trying to get the market to understand a little bit more. So this, after the first 3 weeks, it's known as stretch, we'll start to develop bud sites. After about, I'd say, day 25, you're going to no longer vegetatively grow, and you're going to see your sites start to swell. All of the plant's energy redirects it to its sites, and instead of vegetatively growing, we're going to start swelling. So the flowering process is basically the first 3 weeks is known as stretch, where it still vegetatively grows. It stops, redirects its energy, and similar to like the changing of the seasons where you see leaves fall off the tree, we have a similar scenario going on where the plant will tell us when she's ready to be taken down. But typically, short of some sativas, which can be a longer flowering period, close to 70 plus days, we're flowering for about 56 to 63 days. So this is as tall as they're going to get. They're just going to continue to swell and stack. So one term that you always want to look out for is called internodal spacing. So this bud site is a node. The space between each bud site refers to your internodal spacing. I want that to be as tight as possible because that also refers to stacking. So instead of having a bud here, 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 you see I have 4 buds right here, 3. Those are going to swell together and almost create one large apex. Some strains are just more inclined to be stretchier and have larger internodal spacing. Others, they stack. And the reason I'm laughing is sometimes a leaf to calyx ratio too heavy will be a wonderful plant, but on the back end and post-harvest, it's a nuisance to trim. So we have to always keep that in mind. So the last thing we'll do in this room prior to a harvest is come in and do what I call a pre-harvest walkthrough.
So you said these have about 2 more weeks?
Yes, sir.
And what's the next step of the process immediately after this?
Then they will get brought to our dry room. So they'll get cut from the stalk, they'll get weighed, and that's their wet weight. A general rule of thumb is during your drying phase, whether that's 10 to 14 days, you lose about 80% of your wet weight through the drying process. So we allow the plant to dry, and then we're going to cure it. We'll come down, we'll buck the individual sites off of the stalk. We'll trim those. Those will get put into a receptacle that is indicative of what it should be in. And we're going to burp those frequently to allow the process to final its cure prior to being sent out. So this whole thing, where from seed to flower, is very, very important. But post-harvest is the preservation of what you just did for those months. So post-harvest is just as important. And if anything goes wrong in that room, you really just kind of messed up everything you just did for 3 months. So it's extremely important to understand the climate, the humidity, the temperature, and the time that we want to hang these girls for. So once they get cut, they'll get cut from the stalk, they'll get put on Z-racks and rollers, and then they'll actually get rolled into a dry room where it has basically like, it's almost like a hanger. And then you have your stalks off that, and then you can put your hanger on our stationary racks, which I'll show you in our dry room. Liquid line, they also have a concentrated salt line. We go with the liquid line. I would say it's easier with user-friendly for a system like this where we're injecting it into these larger tanks. With their salt line, what you end up having a lot of times, you fight in chemistry. They have a product called Balance. It's potassium silicate. They use that in lieu of a pH up. Then they have a product called Core, which is more acidic. So if it's injected at the same time, what happens is you have a base and an acid mixing, and you have fallout. So your pH, in layman, just how acidic or alkaline your water is, your pH will fall out. Here, with our medium being cocoa, will be in a unique blend of which it's more used to and likes about a 5.8, 5.9 pH. Something like Rockwell being more alkaline needs a more acidic feed like 5.5. If you had something like peat moss, which is more acidic, you go in more alkaline, so you go in about a 6.2. But here, all of our nutrients get brought in. They get siphoned into their individual 35 gallons over there, and everything in there is being hooked up to GrowLink. So Rob has everything pre-programmed where, depending on the flowering stage and room, it has its own recipe, and everything is pre-programmed. So there's level sensors on these tanks right here. When it gets below a certain amount, it registers that it needs a new feed, and that will start pulling, sending to said tanks. The black tanks down there is our holding water, so it runs through our RO skid. This is where all of our nutrients live in these individual tanks. So you see flush, clean, flush, veg, clean, FL1, 2, and 3. So for flower versus veg, one of the biggest things that changes is our nitrogen and phosphorus. Nitrogen promotes vegetative growth. Phosphorus, potassium is more indicative of fruiting, flowering, swelling. So the two ratios that change when you go from veg to flower is you lower your nitrogen and you up your phosphorus and potassium. In week 3 of flower, we introduce PK. It's basically a booster. So that's why we need to have individualized tanks, because our rooms are on different schedules. They're getting a different feed. Something to confirm that's going on correctly. again, is we have sensors being pH and EC probes that will tell us what my concentration, my hydrogen ions are, be my pH. Your EC is your electrical conductivity, so that's measuring your total dissolved solvents. And it tells me all of that virtually. So if I go into my program and I say I want a 5.8 pH and a 2.3 thousand grams wet weight, a good rule of thumb to know what you may get for your yield is you minus about 80% of that. So after that, they'll get taken down, they'll be bucked. So what you'll do is from the stalk, you'll cut individual bud sites into like a tough bucket. From there, they'll go to our trimmers, they will hand trim, and then it goes to our curing room where we're constantly burping our product until inevitably it is ready for sale. And to your question earlier, the longer the curing time that I can have, the better the product that it will be. But it's, again, large-scale cannabis like we have in here. It's not as soon as it gets cut, it gets sold, but we don't have the luxury of curing for 2 months. And we still are able to get very, very premium product from the time that we can pull down to the time that we need to send that out to a sales team.
So what's your ideal curing time then?
So, well, it's a dumb question because my ideal time would be as long as you can give me. So give me a month. But in being practical with the scale of what we're doing and what the demand asks, we'll probably cure for a week prior to it being sent out. And remember, during this phase, it needs to be tested for full compliance prior to being able to be sold. So here in the state of Ohio, it's most likely similar to other states where what I'm used to is going to be foreign matter, heavy metals, water activity, total yeast and mold, and then chemical residuals and solvents being used. So there's a threshold for each. What's tested for? You either get a non-A, so non-applicable, if it's not detected, or let's say your CFUs for total yeast and mold is 1,000. You need to get underneath that, otherwise you just put your entire crop at risk of not being able to sell this flower, So again, it's the cleanliness factor is second to none here. It's something that biosecurity, people practices is what we're really trying to preach and implement. So the understanding of this right here being one of the dirtiest things in this building. So we actually don't allow phones in any of our grow rooms. We've worked with labs, me personally, you're okay, where they will identify your phone as one of the biggest petri dishes. We get auger plating done. I've done R&D air samples at every grow I've been at. So we've done this about 2 weeks ago where we'll have a room, we'll do an air quality swab to see what is present, and then we'll implement something like in Flower 5, it looked like just basically a hexagon. It's called ProCure. It's a slow release, slow release gas that mitigates spores. It tries to knock it back. So what you can do is you can come into a room prior to implementing something, do an air quality test, see how many spores are your threshold, and then implement something, whether if it's an ozone burner, quick release gas, fungicide, whatever you want to do, and then you can do another air quality to see how effective said treatment was.
Steve, you've
Yes.
been to assisted in multiple growings across the United States.
Yes.
Do you believe that this is the most technologically supportive of your growing?
Yes, I do, because specifically when I talk about my environmental controls, the thought process that was put into our HVAC system, the companies they went with, the design, the orientation, and the implementation of which was second to none. There was not a penny spared, and a lot of times across the 6 states I've worked at, going up to 200,000 square feet, where you penny pinch on HVAC, you pay for it in the long run. And that's either having to stop production to retrofit rooms, or it's, in some grows, they don't have the ability to do that, so they literally have to take their second tier off and go back to a single tier facility. So yes, I do think I've been set up, and the team here has been set up equipment-wise, mechanically, to grow the best weed in the United States that we possibly can. To that, and this is a testament to Justin, my boss, the genetic library and profile that he's brought to the table and that we put together is very unique. Everything is strain specific. You hear me talking about the plant's attributes. Having a genetic library that you can depend on that not a lot of people have, that makes you more than a statistic. where in this industry, typically you're just one of 100 grows. We will be a household name because of those strains that we have, the team that we put into place, the effort, and just everyone's commitment to wanting to go in the same direction. There's a good book called Traction, if there's any readers out there that talks about, you can have the best people, but if they're in the wrong seed, if someone's rowing in the wrong direction, your sales going to go down. So I think all around, starting from ownership down to the hires that we've put in this past week, everything has been done for the greater good of this facility. And it will continue to be just like that. So it's a medicinal facility still. Again, it's the reason I got into this, with my mother being a breast cancer survivor patient, and having heard the medicinal values she got. I'm not saying everyone will get them, but what she received versus the pharmaceutical medicines that at least something may help her, but by default, she always had a negative side effect, where cannabis was something that for the first time in 15 years gave her some type of relief. That gave me the push to actually leave DePaul University, where I was doing a poli-sci major. I'm trying to become an attorney. My father has been an attorney for 40 plus years, so when I told him that was my career change, it was an odd discussion to say the least. But I had nothing but support from them. I got into this when I was 18. I'll be 32 in January. I've been doing large-scale operations and management now for the past 10 years. So my passion became my career, and I love it. I think everyone here needs to have that mentality. Otherwise, it becomes something that's not as fun on a daily basis, if you will. And here it's, we want to have fun, but we're also here to provide medicine to patients who are in dire need of it. So for me, it's plants first, and that's why I kind of start that with when people come on board. It's giving them a clear slate of what to expect instead of just out of the blue having someone ask to work the weekend and they're saying, wait, what? So I like to be as transparent as possible, and I think it starts from the top down with our ownership, with our group of people. I think we've really put a very good group together, so I'm extremely excited. But that's pretty much my spiel. I haven't done it.
What's up, everybody? Well, that wraps up the tour of the King City Gardens. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe button, and share with all your friends and family. And I wish you all a happy new year. I'll see you soon. I'll probably live stream for New Year's too. So keep an eye out. Keep the notification bell active.